In the nearly 2 years since I started this series, there have been a number of general strike declarations. These include the October strike, the Black Friday blackout, and the May Day strike. These attempts at creating a general strike were fake strikes. A fake strike is a general strike declared via social media by largely anonymous activists with little to no organizing. While the trend appears innocuous at first glance, it cheapens one of organized labor's strongest direct action tactics and, ironically, distracts workers from the organizing that makes a general strike possible. So to conclude the general strike series, we're going to look at the fake strike trend. All fake strikes start roughly the same way. Someone creates a poster with a gaudy color scheme, selects a date, slaps some vague goals on it, and posts it all over Reddit, TikTok, and various other social media platforms. Additionally, they will create a link to a website or Discord, and there you have it. A fake strike is born. This has become a common enough occurrence that people post the same meme in response to every new fake strike. And you can already see the problem. General strikes aren't just declared by a single person, and all the general strikes we've covered never once was a general strike decided and declared by one person. Organized workers and the members they elected to represent them declared a citywide work stoppage, and only after the rank and file voted to authorize them. In a couple of instances, we saw how difficult that process could be. Prior to the July strike in 1934, Local 574's leadership successfully met with members opposed to striking and reaffirmed that there was no other way to achieve fairer pay and conditions. In Seattle 1919, the rank and file of various unions voted to have a general strike and whether or not they would participate. Even when local elected representatives in the Seattle Central Labor Council opposed participation in the general strike, they knew that the decision could only be made by the rank and file. In the case of the only proposed national general strike in American history, the Mooney General Strike, there was a national convention of labor leaders discussing how the nationwide general strike would proceed. And even then, local unions had to vote on whether or not they would participate. In all of those cases, workers and union representatives had serious discussions about how a general strike could help them achieve their goals, but how it could also negatively affect their communities. They weighed the benefits with the risks and determined together that a general strike was the correct action. And that is how a future general strike in the United States will be decided, from the bottom up by organized workers who see no alternative action to achieving their goals. And on the topic of goals, when a fake strike is declared, the goals have already been laid out in advance. Much like the decision to have a general strike, the goals of the strike are defined by rank and file workers. We saw this in every general strike we covered. As any organizer will tell you, when workers feel that they have no say in the goals themselves, they feel alienated from the movement. Organizers don't approach people with a goal. They ask workers what is bothering them in the workplace and then educate them on how collective action can solve those problems. The workers have to select the goals. Removing agency from the workers and placing it within a handful of individuals is the problem in the first place. We already live in a system where people don't have agency. It's irrelevant if those individuals are well-meaning. Taking control in this manner will only recreate the same structures and problems that workers currently face, union or non-union. I also want to focus on the goals fake strikers select and why they are a problem. The October strike goals were a $20 minimum wage, 12 weeks of paid maternity leave, health care, a 4-day work week, environmental regulation, and a 25% corporate tax rate. May Day strike goals were something along the lines of a thriving wage, $30 minimum wage, health care, 6 weeks of vacation, full maternity leave, and closing the tax loophole, though many of the higher level people didn't even seem sure of what the actual list of goals were. These goals are incredibly vague and appear to have been selected without much thought into how they would work, let alone if they could even be achieved in the first place. I don't think these goals are bad in and of themselves. They would benefit society as a stopgap measure to the abolition of the capitalist system. But not a single fake striker is presented a strategy that would actually be able to achieve even just a $20 minimum wage. Which is still too low, by the way. Fake strikers also can't provide any evidence that those goals are something workers are willing to strike over. Even in cases where workers say they support the goals, they view them, and by extension the fake strike, as unrealistic and unachievable. It's no surprise that workers want absolutely nothing to do with fake strikes. Why would anyone risk losing their job over goals that are virtually impossible to achieve? The reality here is that the goals are selected by what sounds attractive to the fake strike organizers and what they think is attractive to the majority of workers in the United States. They don't truly represent what the majority of workers want or need, nor do they represent what goals could be achieved with a general strike. The goals are a recruiting tool for attracting more workers to the movement fake strikers want to build. If fake strikers want to know what goals workers are willing to lay everything on the line for, they need to be connected to the working class, ideally through unions and community organizing. The leadership of Local 574 understood this unquestionably. They had connected with the rank-and-file workers as rank-and-file workers. They understood the problems within the Minneapolis trucking industry and what organized trucking workers are willing to risk to solve them. Fake strikers have to get connected with workers and let them select the goals. Let's talk about unions. The May Day strike and others usually plan to have mainstream unions take over and lead a national general strike. I have discussed before that fake strikes haven't been supported by mainstream unions and why that should come as no surprise. International unions and the bureaucracy that ran them did not support the 1934 Minneapolis General Strikes or the 1919 Seattle General Strike. In the aftermath of the former, Teamsters President Dan Tobin and the AFL dechartered Local 574. Even today, the AFL-CIO would not and could not organize a general strike. The organization is too busy attempting to cooperate with employers, supporting politicians that don't care about workers, and trying to hold on to police associations. Additionally, nearly every collective bargaining agreement they negotiate contains a no-strike clause, where unionized workers promise not to strike for the duration of a contract. The idea that mainstream unions will lead workers into a general strike in the near future is simply baseless. However, I have also stressed the importance of workers being a part of a union during a general strike, and the roles unions play in one. In this regard, I'm talking about local unions like Local 574, or the over 100 local unions involved in the 1919 Seattle General Strike. We would need the membership of those established unions to be so committed that they disobey national leadership and are willing to risk losing their charter. None of the fake strikes have presented a strong enough case for union workers to do so, even in the cases where those workers want there to be a general strike. If fake strikers met with local unions in their area, or better yet joined them, they could discuss long-term labor goals. That could have a profound effect on getting local union support, but even then, that would only get them roughly 10% of the workers in the United States. Most people have a very conservative definition of union. As I have discussed before on this channel, a union doesn't necessarily mean an international union like the Teamsters or the UAW. It simply means two or more workers working together to improve their workplace. Even under this simple definition, very few fake strikers tend to be union members from my experience. They generally have zero union experience and little to no idea how unions actually operate. As a result, they often say that once they get enough people involved, they will approach unions to organize the strike itself. To fake strikers, unions aren't seen as a necessity for organizing a general strike, but rather as a separate group to be approached in due time. This strategy won't work, but the current circumstances do present a unique opportunity for organizing. Fake strikers generally don't organize. They have little to no interest in any sort of workplace organizing. I've often asked fake strikers if they have organized their workplace or if they are willing to connect with their coworkers and form unions. Most haven't and dismiss local workplace organizing in favor of creating the fake strike, because if you build it, they will come. If my coworkers see that a general strike is being organized, they will join. This ultimately leads to the same result every time: no general strike. This cycle puts no one any closer to organizing a general strike. As we saw prior to the 1892 New Orleans General Strike and 1934 Minneapolis General Strikes, a period of organizing was necessary to make them possible. We desperately need more organizing of the right kind of unions. As stated earlier, only around 10% of American workers are represented by unions that often sign away their right to strike. In order to achieve a general strike, there must be more unionized workers who refuse to sign away their rights and have a preference for direct action. With such a low union rate, I think that presents workers with a unique opportunity to organize solidarity unions. Solidarity unions are unions where workers build worker power amongst themselves and carry out direct action to achieve their demands rather than relying on the National Labor Relations Board or mainstream unions. This doesn't mean that solidarity unions completely abandon collective bargaining agreements. However, they know where their power lies, in the strong bonds that they form, and the actions that they take to directly challenge the authority of the boss. In a solidarity union, rank-and-file workers create a workplace committee that is capable of winning via direct action and using those victories to build power and tackle even larger grievances. This framework can be expanded to multiple workplaces and industries and eventually create the organizations needed to create a general strike, among other things. In order to create more solidarity unions, there needs to be more workers interested in unionizing, and more resources that educate workers on how to create solidarity unions. Ideally, we would need something like the IWW's OT 101, but on a much larger scale and more widespread. It's a much more realistic goal than you might think, if enough workers commit to it. This kind of organizing could be a place where people interested in organizing a general strike put their energy and have a positive outcome, while also still moving in the direction of a general strike in the future. Fake strikers don't focus on creating or expanding mutual aid networks in their communities. Typically, fake strikers instruct workers to stock up on food prior to the strike, which makes little sense according to their logic. They are planning a general strike because the working class is underpaid and can't make ends meet. How is someone supposed to afford stocking up on food? A lack of mutual aid, a strike fund, or other resources is another reason why workers don't take fake strikes seriously. When Mayday strikers asked retail workers on Reddit to join their strike, the top replies were always something along the lines of, "I'm not going to join because there is no strike fund or mutual aid." Fake strikers have yet to learn from those responses. As we saw in Minneapolis and Seattle, mutual aid and strike relief was central to the demonstrations. They knew that workers and strikers alike would be unable to feed themselves, so they created a system to feed their communities. Local 574's Union Hall satisfied thousands of picketers with food, shelter, and entertainment. The network created by Seattle Labor was absolutely incredible. It fed an estimated 30,000 people a day and supplied milk to working-class babies all throughout the city. Even more incredibly, the largest general strike in history occurred in India, and they had extensive networks able to support an estimated 250 million people. Prolonged, effective general strikes cannot exist without mutual aid networks. You don't want whole communities unsupported like in the 1892 New Orleans general strike. Additionally, in the aftermath of the Seattle general strike, Seattle unions plan to open their own businesses and cooperatives. I think that organized labor and mutual aid networks should explore creating cooperatives. Worker cooperatives could inspire workers to develop new strategies for supporting their communities, fund alternatives to privately owned businesses, and plant the seeds for worker ownership of the means of production. Okay, maybe my imagination is getting the best of me. In any case, creating and expanding mutual aid networks should be our primary goal now, regardless of whether or not we want to have a general strike in the future. While some fake strikers have planned to reach out to AOC and similar pro-labor politicians, for the most part they thankfully don't put too much faith into elected officials. As we saw in Minneapolis and Seattle, politicians are not on our side. Even the labor-sympathetic politicians turned against the strikes and ordered actions that harmed workers more than the employers. When the state intervenes in a labor dispute, its goal is labor peace and getting the economy running again. As a direct result, politicians will try to compromise with both the capitalists and the workers, which always benefits the capitalists. President Biden, touted as the most pro-labor president in years, proved this once again when he betrayed the rail workers and forced them to accept a contract they voted down. That bill was bipartisan too. Democrats and Republicans would join hands with Capitol every time. There is no such thing as a pro-labor administration. I've been in 2 different fake strike Discord servers, and generally speaking there's very little organizing going on in there. The server really just becomes a hangout space to talk about vague plans for the strike and off-topic stuff. I don't think it's a problem for workers to treat an online organizing space as a place to relax so long as organizing gets done. It gives off Union Hall vibes. Union halls were important places where workers were exposed to radical politics. It's one place where workers developed class consciousness and became socialists, syndicalists, communists, and so on. However, it is a problem when that space is spreading reactionary views. In the Discord servers of both the October strike and the May Day strike, there was rampant class reductionism, to the point where some people were basically just blaming minorities for there not being a general strike. Some of the leaders of the May Day strike made it clear to members their opinions on identity politics and how a general strike would inherently solve minority problems. Or those problems would be solved after the general strike. One leader outright called all identity politics a distraction. For many of us, this discourse is nothing new. Time and time again, we've seen a lack of solidarity with people of color, or disabled workers, or trans workers from leftists like this. They say they want to improve the conditions of the working class, but who is that working class? Yeah, it's white working people like them. Now, I don't think that a majority of the May Day strikers held these opinions. However, the fact that they thought that people holding these positions were capable of being leaders of a general strike is troubling, to say the least. While Discord can complement organizing and alleviate some communication problems, it isn't a replacement for in-person organizing. As a fellow worker once said, workers have to take it offline. Interestingly, some Mayday strikers in Michigan and other places met in real life and presumably discussed steps to organize a general strike. And while it's great to see like-minded workers connecting in real life, imagine what they could have accomplished by discussing a realistic local organizing strategy. This brings me to my final critique. Attempting to organize a general strike without unions or mutual aid is a distraction. It's a distraction from the real organizing that has a lasting impact on communities and eventually makes a general strike possible. Imagine how much closer to a general strike the American working class would be if fake strikers had spent the past 2 years organizing. While even something like a regional or industrial general strike would still be years off, the foundation for smaller forms of direct action could have been laid. But even though it is a distraction, it is refreshing to see people who want to engage in direct action. The problem with fake strikes isn't that people want to have a general strike. It's that people don't want to take the steps to organize one. If a general strike isn't possible yet, what should people who want to organize one do instead? Well, first and foremost, stop declaring general strikes. I know that the Mayday Strike folks are planning for 2023, but it's not going to happen. Right now, people should focus on organizing unions in their communities. That means workplace unions, preferably with a solidarity lens, and tenant unions because landlords are garbage and eviction is a real threat during prolonged general strikes. The American working class is currently largely atomized and generally opposed to collective action. We have to get people connected again and show them how collective action gets the goods. We also need to create and expand mutual aid networks within communities. Everything from supporting the houseless to community gardens, first aid, and defense programs. Learn how to support your community by joining your local Food Not Bombs. In fact, there are plenty of orgs with like-minded people that you can join today to learn how to organize, if you so choose. The Industrial Workers of the World, the Socialist Rifle Association, and any other leftist gun clubs, the list goes on. But please, for the love of God, do not join the Party for Socialism and Liberation. It is an org that is run by and protects abusers. Unfortunately, a number of Mayday strikers have joined, and I hope they leave the PSL as soon as possible. I am not just saying join an org. It's best to do your research before you think about joining any organization in your area. If a good org doesn't exist in your area, it's probably better to just form a new one anyway. Whether or not American workers will decide to organize a general strike in the future is unpredictable. Workers may decide that a national general strike is not the best tactic, and develop their own direct action strategies which are better suited for the 21st century. In any case, workplace and community organizing will have a positive effect no matter what tactic workers choose, so long as it's based in direct action. Whether you want to fight for better pay and working conditions, climate justice, the abolition of the wage system, or everything in between, only direct action can achieve these goals. That direct action can range from individual acts of sabotage to, yes, a national general strike. But the only way to make that possible is to organize. No more fake strikes. Thanks for watching. We did it. We finished the General Strike series, my nearly 2-year-long excuse to deeply explore the history of American general strikes. I hope you enjoyed the series as much as I enjoyed making it, even though it briefly consumed my life for a while. The good news is that during that time, I researched some new topics and focused on organizing my workplace, the fruits of which you will see on this channel over the next few months. But for the foreseeable future, it's going to be shorter content. Until we meet again, see ya!